The first thing Captain Lisa Harlan noticed as her boots hit the metallic floor of the alien freighter was the smell. Not the acrid tang of burning polymers or the choking stench of smoke she expected. It was something far worse. It smelled alive. Atmosphere is stable, but this ship is barely holding together, came the tinny voice of Krell, her reptilian engineer. Through her comm his clawed fingers danced over a control panel by the airlock. Localized hull breaches in sections 14 through 20. Temperature in the core is climbing. Fast. Lisa nodded, even though she knew Krell couldn't see her through the layers of fire-retardant gear. We've got a ticking bomb then. All right people, let's move. Her voice was calm but firm like tempered steel. Years of experience didn't leave room for panic, and panic was the one thing this team couldn't afford right now. The alien crew of the freighter, members of the Eudarii species, had been evacuated hours ago, their chitinous exoskeletons twitching with terror. Whatever had gone wrong with their ship, they hadn't stayed to explain. They'd only managed to scream one thing over the emergency channels. Asterisk, it burns, it burns. Asterisk. Lisa's team was down to just 3 members now. Not ideal for a mission like this, but budget cuts and bureaucratic red tape didn't care about the size of the galaxy or the dangers lurking in it. Beside her, Krell hissed softly, his frills flaring as he processed more data. Behind them, Aaron, the squad's medic and Lisa's closest friend, adjusted the straps on his oxygen tank. His usually cheerful face was pale. Something's not right about this fire, Aaron murmured as if speaking too loudly would attract its attention. The Eudarii, whatever happened here scared the exoskeletons off them. You've seen those guys. They don't scare easy. Lisa glanced back at him. And we're not here to scare easy either, Aaron. Focus. The team moved deeper into the freighter. The corridor walls pulsed faintly, not with light but something else, a flicker that seemed to dance just beyond the edge of perception. It was heat but not the ordinary kind. It shimmered and bent reality, a strange mirage-like effect that made the metal surfaces look almost liquid. Captain, Krell's voice came again, low and strained. Sensors are, he paused, tapping a claw against his portable scanner. They're useless. I can't make sense of this data. It's not a fire. Not entirely. Lisa stiffened. Explain? I'm detecting energy signatures in the thermal spectrum, but they're moving almost like they're alive. Aaron groaned. Alive? Please tell me you're joking. I don't joke, Krell snapped, his frills flattening. Not about things that can kill us. Let's not jump to conclusions, Lisa interjected. She didn't believe in supernatural nonsense, not even in the farthest reaches of space. Fire was fire. It didn't matter if it burned wood, metal, or alien polymers, there was always a way to fight it. But as they turned a corner into what should have been a storage bay, Lisa's certainty wavered. The fire, or whatever it was waiting for them. It wasn't the roaring orange inferno of Earth fires, nor the eerie green combustion of Eudarii fuel sources. No, this flame was blue. Not the cool, pale blue of a welding torch, but a vivid, searing hue that hurt to look at directly. It crawled along the walls, consuming nothing yet leaving charred black veins in its wake. And it moved not like a spreading flame but like a predator stalking prey. Lisa's breath caught for just a moment before she steadied herself. She pointed at the writhing fire with her nozzle. Krell, Aaron, spread out. Let's contain this thing. The first burst from her extinguisher hit the blue flames with a hissing roar. For a brief moment, the flames recoiled, writhing like a living thing in pain. Lisa's confidence surged. Asterisk see? Fire is fire asterisk. But then it fought back. The flames surged forward, faster than any fire she'd ever seen. They moved in a wave, ignoring the suppressant foam entirely. Krell shouted something in his native tongue, his scanner clattering to the ground as he jumped back. Aaron cursed and pulled Lisa back just as the flames lashed out like a whip, barely missing her helmet. What the hell? Aaron shouted, fumbling with his own extinguisher. That's not fire. That's something else. Lisa ignored him, her mind racing. Fire didn't lash out. Fire didn't move like this. But she couldn't afford to let fear paralyze her. Krell, report. What are we dealing with? Krell's voice trembled. It's not in the database. Captain, it's feeding on the atmosphere. It's burning oxygen faster than it should be possible. Lisa gritted her teeth. Aaron switched to the foam suppressant. Krell, seal off this section. We'll starve it out. The team scrambled into action. Foam suppressant filled the air, coating the walls and floor in a slick, chemical layer designed to suffocate any flame. But the blue fire didn't suffocate. It danced through the foam like it wasn't even there, its tendrils snapping and twisting as if taunting them. Aaron's voice cracked as he shouted, It's not working, Lisa. Nothing's working. Lisa bit back a curse. The smell was worse now, acrid and sickly sweet like burning flesh. She glanced at her oxygen meter. Levels were dropping faster than expected. Whatever this thing was, it was pulling oxygen from the room, from the vents, maybe even from their tanks. Fall back, she ordered. Regroup by the central junction. We'll come at it from another angle. But the fire wasn't done with them. It surged again, faster this time, cutting off their retreat. The corridor behind them was now a wall of twisting blue light, pulsing like a heartbeat. The team was trapped. Aaron's breathing was ragged over the comm. We're gonna die here, he whispered. Lisa grabbed his shoulder, forcing him to meet her gaze through the visor of his helmet. Not on my watch. Her mind raced. If conventional methods weren't working, she needed to think outside the box. The fire was feeding on oxygen, so they had to cut it off completely. But sealing the room would mean suffocating themselves in the process. There had to be another way. Krell, she barked, are there any power junctions nearby? Something we can overload? Krell hesitated, then checked his scanner. Yes, but, Captain, if we overload the junction, it'll blow half the ship. Better half the ship than all of us, Lisa said. Set it up. Krell muttered something about human recklessness but didn't argue. He darted to the nearest access panel, his claws moving with practiced precision. Lisa and Aaron held the line, their extinguishers spraying foam in wide arcs to keep the fire at bay. It wasn't much, but it slowed the flames just enough to buy them time. Almost there, Krell said, his voice tight with concentration. Just a few more seconds. The fire seemed to sense what they were doing. It roared, a sound like metal grinding against bone, and surged forward in one final desperate attack. Lisa stepped in front of Krell, her extinguisher empty but her resolve unshaken. Come on, you bastard, she muttered under her breath. You want to fight? You've got one. The flames lashed out and Lisa braced herself. But before they could reach her, Krell shouted, done, and slammed his claw onto the panel. There was a blinding flash of light, followed by a deafening explosion. The shockwave knocked Lisa off her feet and for a moment, everything went dark. When she came to, the corridor was eerily silent. The blue flames were gone, but the walls were scorched black and the air was thick with smoke. Lisa coughed, her lungs burning as she struggled to sit up. Everyone to report, she croaked. Krell's voice was weak but steady. I'm alive. Barely. Aaron groaned somewhere behind her. Next time, let's not piss off the fire, okay? Lisa managed a weak chuckle. Noted. But as she looked around the ruined corridor, a nagging thought crept into her mind. The fire was gone, but its presence lingered, like a shadow that refused to fade. And deep down she knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The silence didn't last long. Just as Lisa steadied herself, a low rumble echoed through the freighter. It wasn't mechanical, it sounded organic, like the growl of a beast stirred from slumber. Lisa's instincts screamed at her to move, but her body felt sluggish, heavy from the lingering heat and the weight of her gear. Krell was the first to pick up on it, his frills flaring in alarm. Captain, the ship's core, something is wrong. The temperature is rising again. Lisa staggered to her feet, forcing her mind to push past the haze. She glanced at Krell's scanner, now flickering with strange readings. We overloaded the junction. That should have been enough to kill it. Krell shook his head, his voice filled with grim certainty. We didn't kill it. We just pissed it off. Aaron, still slumped against the scorched wall, groaned. You're saying it's still alive? That thing just ate half the ship's power and it's still kicking? Lisa didn't have an answer, but she wasn't about to let fear take over. Not when her team was depending on her. She pointed toward the freighter's central junction. Krell, where's the core located? If this thing is feeding on power, we need to cut it off completely. Krell hesitated, his frills twitching nervously. The core is 3 levels down. But Captain, the readings I'm seeing, if this thing has spread to the core, it's already too late. The ship is a dead zone. Lisa's jaw tightened. Then we make sure it doesn't spread further. If we can't save the ship, we'll at least stop it from reaching the Ydarii station. Aaron pushed himself up with a wince. And how do we do that? This isn't just a fire. It's like, I don't know, some kind of parasite. It doesn't burn, it consumes. Lisa didn't respond immediately. She stared at the blackened walls, at the faint traces of blue that still flickered like dying embers. Aaron was right. This wasn't a normal fire. It was something alien, something alive, and it was feeding on the ship like a predator stripping its prey. But even predators had weaknesses. Krell, she said, turning to her engineer, how do we vent the core? Can we eject it? Krell's frills flattened in shock. Eject the core? Captain, that's suicide. The energy release. We'll tear the ship apart, Lisa finished. Yeah, I know. But if we don't stop this thing here, it'll spread. You saw the Yudarii, they barely made it out alive. Imagine what this thing could do on a station. Or worse, a planet? Krell hesitated, his claws hovering over his scanner. The ejection system is functional but barely. It'll take time to override the safety protocols. Lisa nodded. Then start working on it. Aaron, you're with me. We'll buy Krell the time he needs. Aaron's eyes widened. Wait, buy time? Lisa, you saw what that thing did. You really want to go back in there? Lisa gave him a grim smile. We don't have a choice. The path to the core was a nightmare. The blue flames had spread, weaving through the freighter like veins in a living organism. They pulsed and shifted, almost as if they were aware of the intruders. Lisa and Aaron moved carefully, their extinguishers held at the ready, but the suppressant foam did little more than slow the flames' advance. At one point, a tendril of fire lashed out, striking the wall just inches from Aaron's helmet. He jumped back with a curse. I hate this. I hate this so much. Stay focused, Lisa said, though her own nerves were fraying. Every step forward felt like walking into a trap, but she couldn't let fear stop her. Not now. They reached a service hatch leading to the core chamber. The door was warped, its edges blackened and twisted from the heat. Lisa forced it open with a grunt, revealing a narrow access tunnel lined with glowing conduits. The heat here was suffocating even through her gear. Captain, Krell's voice crackled over the comm, I'm in the process of overriding the core ejection protocols, but the system is fighting me. The flames, whatever they are, they're interfering with the controls. Lisa grimaced. Just keep working, Krell. We'll handle the rest. Aaron glanced at her. Define handle? She didn't answer. Instead, she motioned for him to follow her into the tunnel. The closer they got to the core, the more intense the heat became. The air shimmered with waves of energy, and the conduits lining the walls flickered erratically, their circuits struggling under the strain. When they reached the core chamber, Lisa stopped dead in her tracks. The blue fire was here, everywhere. It clung to the walls and the machinery like a living thing, pulsing and writhing with an almost hypnotic rhythm. At the center of the chamber was the core itself, a massive sphere of contained plasma, now flickering with patches of eerie blue light. It's feeding on the core, Aaron whispered. Lisa, if this thing consumes the entire reactor. I know, Lisa said. Her voice was calm, but her mind was racing. They couldn't fight this thing head-on. Not here, not like this. She scanned the room, searching for anything they could use to disrupt the fire, to slow it down long enough for Krell to eject the core. Her eyes landed on a series of coolant lines running along the ceiling. If they could rupture those lines, the sudden drop in temperature might destabilize the fire, maybe even force it to retreat. Aaron, see those coolant lines? She said, pointing. We're going to rupture them. Aaron stared at her. And how exactly are we supposed to do that without turning this whole place into a popsicle? Lisa pulled a thermal cutter from her belt. Quickly. The plan was simple, but execution was another matter entirely. Lisa climbed onto a maintenance platform, the heat pressing down on her like a physical weight. Every movement felt sluggish, her body protesting against the strain. Below her, Aaron kept watch, his extinguisher at the ready. Captain, Krell's voice came over the comm again, more urgent this time. The flames are spreading faster than anticipated. I don't know how much longer I can keep the system stable. Just hold on, Lisa said through gritted teeth. She activated the thermal cutter, its beam slicing through the first coolant line. A hiss of pressurized gas erupted into the chamber, followed by a sudden, sharp drop in temperature. The blue flames recoiled, their movements becoming erratic. It's working, Aaron shouted. Lisa, it's... Before he could finish, a tendril of fire lashed out, striking the platform beneath Lisa's feet. The metal groaned, buckling under the sudden heat. Lisa barely had time to react before the platform collapsed, sending her crashing to the floor below. Lisa? Aaron was at her side in an instant, his face pale with panic. Are you okay? She coughed, her body screaming in protest. I'm fine. Keep cutting the lines. Aaron hesitated, then nodded. He climbed onto the remains of the platform and resumed the task, his hands trembling but steady. One by one, the coolant lines ruptured, flooding the chamber with freezing gas. The blue flames writhed and twisted, their light dimming as the temperature continued to drop. Krell, Lisa gasped into her comm, how's it looking? There was a pause, then Krell's voice came back, triumphant but strained. The core ejection system is online. I just need a few more seconds to. The comm cut out, replaced by a deafening roar. The blue flames surged one final time, their tendrils lashing out in every direction. Lisa and Aaron barely had time to dive for cover as the fire struck the core, its light flaring brighter than ever. And then just as suddenly it was gone. The chamber was dark, the air thick with smoke and the acrid stench of burned metal. Lisa pushed herself up, her body aching but still functional. Krell, report. The comm crackled and Krell's voice came through, faint but steady. Core ejected. The ship, it's stabilizing. For now. Lisa let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They'd done it. But as she looked at the scorched remains of the chamber, she couldn't shake the feeling that the fire hadn't just been extinguished, it had retreated. Waiting. Watching. And it wasn't finished with them yet. The freighter shuddered violently as the ejected core's detonation ripples surged through the vessel. Lisa Harlan braced herself against the scorched wall of the core chamber, her body aching from the last encounter. Beside her, Aaron collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air, his face slick with sweat beneath his helmet. Krell status? Lisa barked into her comm, the urgency cutting through the lingering haze of smoke and acrid heat. Static crackled in her earpiece before Krell's voice broke through, strained but coherent. The ejection worked. The core detonated outside the hull, but we've still got problems. Power levels are critically low and, he paused, his tone shifting into something sharper, more alarmed. And the flames are still here. The core didn't kill it? Lisa's stomach dropped. What do you mean it's still here? The core was its energy source. That's what I thought too, Krell said, his claws clacking against his portable scanner. But it's not just feeding on power. He faltered and his voice dropped to a whisper. It's adapting, Captain. It's feeding on the ship itself. Maybe even, he didn't finish but Lisa didn't need him to. Aaron, pale and visibly shaken, muttered, You've got to be kidding me. It's not just a fire, it's a parasite. Lisa's mind churned. If the flames could adapt, feeding on the very structure of the ship, then ejecting the core had only bought them time. Worse, with power reserves dwindling, their chances of escaping were dropping by the second. She stood, forcing her aching body into motion. Krell, can we initiate a controlled burn? She asked, striding toward Aaron, who was still catching his breath. Is there any way we can isolate the flames, starve them by sealing off the remaining sections of the ship? Krell's voice wavered. I'd need access to the main engineering hub, but it's on Deck 12, exactly where the flames are spreading fastest. Even if we make it there, I can't guarantee it'll work. Lisa nodded grimly. We don't have to guarantee it works. We just have to try. The journey to Deck 12 felt like descending into hell itself. Every corridor they passed through bore fresh signs of the fire's touch. Walls twisted and blackened, conduits pulsing faintly with unnatural blue light. The ship groaned beneath their boots, the structural integrity failing by the minute. Aaron walked a step behind Lisa, his extinguisher held tight in both hands. He hadn't said much since they'd left the core chamber, but Lisa could feel the weight of his fear. She didn't blame him. Fear was natural. What mattered was whether they let it consume them, or push through it. You know, Aaron said suddenly, his voice shaky but trying for humor, this wasn't in the job description when I signed up for interstellar firefighting. Fight alien plasma monsters wasn't exactly on the brochure. Lisa gave a faint smirk, even as her focus remained on the path ahead. Guess you didn't read the fine print? Krell's voice crackled over the comm, interrupting the brief moment of levity. Captain, the flames are converging on Deck 12. It's like they know what we're trying to do. I'm detecting movement in the central conduits, something big. Define big, Krell, Lisa said, her pulse quickening. I don't know how to describe it, Krell replied, his voice tinged with disbelief. It's like the fire is condensing, coalescing into a central mass. Lisa's grip tightened on her extinguisher. Great. So now it's organizing itself. Fantastic. When they reached Deck 12, the temperature was unbearable. Even through her insulated gear, Lisa could feel the oppressive heat pressing against her like a living thing. The corridor ahead was bathed in an eerie blue glow, the flames twisting and writhing along the walls like living tendrils. And at the far end of the corridor it waited. The mass of fire Krell had described was unlike anything Lisa had ever seen. It hovered in the air, a pulsating sphere of molten blue light, its surface shifting and flickering with a strange, almost hypnotic rhythm. It wasn't just fire anymore, it was something more, something alive. The way it moved, the way it pulsed, it reminded Lisa of a heart, beating with an unnatural rhythm. Aaron froze beside her. Lisa, what is that? She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind raced, analyzing, strategizing, searching for any possible way to deal with this thing. But no amount of training or experience had prepared her for this. The flames surged forward suddenly, tendrils of blue light lashing out like striking serpents. Lisa and Aaron dove for cover, the heat searing the air around them. Krell? Lisa shouted into her comm, we're in position, but the fire, this thing, is attacking. We need a plan now. Krell's voice was frantic. I'm accessing the engineering hub systems remotely. There's a fuel purge option. It'll release all remaining fuel reserves into the conduits and flood the deck. The flames will burn themselves out, or at least weaken enough for us to finish the job. Lisa's heart sank. And the downside? If the fire doesn't burn out, the entire ship could go up. Including us. Lisa gritted her teeth. Do it. The moment Krell initiated the purge, alarms blared throughout the ship. Red warning lights bathed the corridor, mixing with the pulsing blue glow of the flames. A deep rumble echoed through the deck as fuel began flooding the conduits, the pressure building with every second. The flames reacted immediately, surging and writhing as if in pain. The central mass convulsed, its surface shifting violently as the fuel-fed fire engulfed it. Lisa and Aaron crouched behind a bulkhead, the heat so intense it felt like their skin was burning even through their gear. It's working? Aaron shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the flames. Lisa, it's... The fire struck without warning, a tendril of blue light slamming into their cover and tearing through the bulkhead like it was paper. Lisa was thrown backward, her head slamming against the wall. Stars danced in her vision as she struggled to stay conscious. Aaron grabbed her arm, pulling her to her feet. Lisa. Come on, we have to move. But Lisa wasn't looking at him. Her eyes were fixed on the central mass of fire, now writhing violently as the fuel-fed flames consumed it. For a moment she thought they'd won. The mass seemed to be collapsing in on itself, its light dimming, its movements growing sluggish. And then it roared. The sound was deafening, a guttural alien scream that seemed to vibrate through the very bones of the ship. The central mass exploded outward, tendrils of blue fire lashing out in every direction. Lisa and Aaron barely had time to dive for cover as the flames tore through the corridor, consuming everything in their path. Krell? Lisa shouted into her comm, her voice hoarse. Status? The response came immediately, but it wasn't what she wanted to hear. The fire's spreading faster than the fuel purge can contain it. Captain, if we don't abandon ship now, we're not getting out of here alive. Lisa's mind raced. She glanced at Aaron, who was breathing hard, his extinguisher empty and his expression one of barely contained panic. She couldn't blame him. They were out of options. Krell, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her, prep the escape pods. We're coming to you. Aaron looked at her, his eyes wide. You're giving up? Lisa shook her head. Not giving up. Falling back. If we can't stop this thing here, we need to warn the station. We need to warn everyone. Aaron hesitated, then nodded. All right. Let's go. Together they turned and ran, the blue flames roaring behind them like a living, hungry beast. Lisa and Aaron sprinted through the collapsing freighter, the blue fire surging behind them like a tidal wave of living destruction. Every corridor was a gauntlet, the walls buckling and the air thick with smoke and heat. The freighter was dying and the fire was making sure it took everyone with it. Krell, are the escape pods ready? Lisa shouted into her comm, her voice raw from the acrid smoke. Krell's response came through with a crackle. I've prepped the last 2 pods near the airlock. But you're not going to like this. The fire's reached the launch controls. I can override, but you'll need to manually disengage the locks from the outside. Lisa's stomach twisted. Understood. Keep the pods on standby. We're almost there. Aaron cast her a sidelong glance as they barreled down the final corridor. Manual disengage? That's suicide, Lisa. Those locks are outside the hull. If you go out there... I know, she cut him off, her tone brooking no argument. But if we don't get those pods free, no one makes it out of here alive. Aaron started to protest, but the ship groaned violently, a section of the corridor collapsing in a shower of molten debris. Lisa grabbed his arm, pulling him toward a maintenance ladder. Move. We're running out of time. They climbed quickly, the heat intensifying as the fire chased them relentlessly. The freighter wasn't just falling apart, it was turning into a furnace. By the time they reached the airlock, Lisa's muscles were screaming, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Krell was already there, his frills twitching in agitation as he worked frantically at a control panel. The Ydarii engineer's scales glistened with sweat, his usual composure frayed. "Captain, the fire, it's faster than I expected. It's already destabilized the life support systems. We have minutes, maybe less." Lisa nodded, her expression grim. "Aaron, get into the first pod and prep for launch. Krell, you're in the second one." Aaron froze, his face pale. "Wait, what about you?" Lisa grabbed the emergency toolkit hanging by the airlock and slung it over her shoulder. "I'm going outside to disengage the locks. Someone has to do it." "No way," Aaron said, stepping forward. "You've done enough, Lisa. Let me." "Aaron," she said sharply, cutting him off. "You're the only one here who can keep Krell alive if something goes wrong. That's your job now. Mine is to make sure you two make it off this ship." For a moment it looked like Aaron might argue. But then he saw the determination in her eyes, the unshakable resolve that had kept them alive this long. With a reluctant nod, he stepped back. "You better make it back in time." Lisa smiled faintly, though there was no humor in it. "That's the plan." The airlock hissed open, and Lisa stepped out onto the freighter's hull, the void of space stretching endlessly before her. The ejected core had left the ship listing in orbit, its external plating scarred and battered. The blue fire was visible even here, its eerie glow bleeding through cracks and vents like a malevolent heartbeat. Lisa moved quickly, her magnetic boots clamping against the hull as she made her way to the escape pod locks. Her toolkit felt heavier with every step, the oppressive heat radiating even through the metal beneath her. When she reached the first lock, she wasted no time, prying open the access panel and jamming her tools into the exposed mechanisms. The lock resisted her at first, its components warped by the fire's relentless assault. But Lisa was relentless, her hands working with the precision of years spent fighting against impossible odds. Sparks flew as she forced the mechanism to release, the first pod shaking slightly as its clamps disengaged. "One down," she muttered, already moving to the second lock. As she worked, a faint vibration ran through the hull, growing stronger with each passing second. Lisa glanced up, her breath catching in her throat. The blue fire had spread farther than she'd realized. Tendrils of it were crawling across the exterior plating, converging toward her like predators closing in on their prey. "Krell," she said into her comm, her voice tight. "The fire's moving outside the hull. How long until it destabilizes the pods?" Krell's voice was grim. "If it reaches the launch thrusters, it'll ignite the fuel lines. You've got 2 minutes? Maybe less." Lisa cursed under her breath, her hands working faster. The second lock was even more damaged than the first, its gears fused together by the heat. Sweat dripped down her face as she jammed her thermal cutter into the mechanism, forcing it to budge. The fire was closer now, the blue tendrils licking at the edges of the hull. They moved with eerie purpose, as if they could sense her presence, their movements growing more erratic the closer they came. Come on," Lisa muttered, her heart pounding in her chest. Finally, with a metallic groan, the second lock released. The escape pod shifted, its clamps disengaging completely. Lisa activated her comm. "Locks are clear. Launch the pods now." Inside the ship, Krell didn't hesitate. The first pod launched with a burst of propulsion, carrying Aaron safely away. The second followed moments later, its engines flaring as it cleared the freighter's hull. Lisa watched them go, relief flooding her for a brief moment. But the fire wasn't done with her yet. The tendrils surged forward, faster than she could react. One of them struck the hull just behind her, the force of the impact sending her sprawling. She floated for a moment, her tether the only thing keeping her from drifting into the void. The fire loomed above her, its blue light blazing brighter than ever. It wasn't just a fire anymore. It was alive and it was hungry. Lisa reached for the detonator clipped to her belt. It was a fail-safe, meant to overload the freighter's remaining systems and ensure nothing could survive. She hadn't wanted to use it, not while there was still a chance to escape. But now, with the fire closing in and no way out, it was her only option. "Krell," she said into her comm, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. "Tell Aaron he owes me a drink." "Captain," Krell's voice was cut off as Lisa activated the detonator. The freighter exploded in a blinding burst of light, the force of the blast consuming the ship and the fire in one final, cataclysmic act. For a moment there was only silence. In the escape pod, Aaron and Krell watched the explosion from a safe distance, the light fading into the darkness of space. Aaron stared at the spot where the freighter had been, his hands clenched into fists. "She did it," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "She stopped it?" Krell nodded slowly, his frills drooping in sorrow. "She saved us. And the station." Aaron leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes. He could still see her face, her determination, her refusal to give up even in the face of something no one could have prepared for. Lisa Harlan, the human firefighter, had faced an enemy unlike any other, and she'd won. But victory always came at a cost.